From time to time, we get questions from viewers, and we turn to our experts for that. Recently, we had a question on the tie between genetics and bloat in cattle. So for that, we turned to our favorite geneticist, Megan Rolf, who's a beef cattle management specialist here at Oklahoma State University. Megan, what do we know about bloat in relation to the genetics of animals?
Well, the genetics of bloat in beef cattle hasn't been studied extensively. There were some studies in New Zealand dairy cows from about the 1970s, and they showed that bloat was a heritable trait. So it is under a small amount of genetic control. Now, if we look at records from a single year, the heritability is quite low. It's about 0.16 in that range, so it'd be a lowly heritable trait. If you look at records of bloat over multiple years, it's actually a moderate to highly heritable trait. It's about a little over 0.4. So it's definitely under some genetic control. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of genetic tools available for producers to select for traits related to genetic control of bloat.
Okay, explain that heritability. What is that really, as we talk about that over those multiple years, what is that telling us?
So a heritability value reflects the amount of a trait that's controlled by genetics as opposed to the environment. So for a lowly heritable trait, which would be things like fertility traits, they'd be probably below about 0.2, about 0.1 to 0.2 to maybe even 0.25. Those would be considered lowly heritable traits. So they're under much larger control from the environment. So for those kind of traits, we can practice genetic selection, but we can actually make larger improvements much faster if we do things like controlling the environment or focusing on things like crossbreeding programs. Okay. Now, for traits that are highly heritable, so they'd be kind of 0.5 and up, those traits we can make more genetic progress by just focusing on intense genetic selection.
Okay. Now, you watch the news and the shows on TV at night, you get the idea that we really just understand everything there is to know about the genetics out there. I mean, DNA will tell you everything. Where are we really at in terms of beef cattle? What we think we know versus what we think we can get to?
We've made a lot of progress recently, and genetic evaluation systems in purebred beef cattle at least have been around since the 1970s in terms of EPD generation. So EPDs are our main genetic selection tool, and they're very, very effective. They're a great way to practice selection for traits that are included in those national cattle evaluations. Recently, we've got some new genomics tools in the form of DNA testing that have done a couple of things. First, they've allowed us to tackle some of the traits that aren't included in genetic evaluations, so like bovine respiratory disease resistance. We could even tackle bloat that way if we had the data to do so. The other thing it's been able to do has been a lot of breed associations are now incorporating that information into their genetic evaluations. So it gets incorporated into that EPD, and what you see is the EPD will move up or down depending on what that genetic test says about the performance of the animal, and then the accuracy will go up. So we get a more accurate EPD from including that genomic testing information.
Does it help or scientists like yourself, if producers are keeping better records on the farm, that as you do genetic testing, then you can kind of tie those to the physical records they've kept?
Absolutely. If there are a lot of good records on a farm, we may be able to work in the university system to do some research on those herds. The other thing that keeping good records does is it really helps the breed associations to put together a good set of EPDs and have a really powerful database behind their national cattle evaluations.
All right, good information as always from Megan Rolf. And if you have a question you'd like to put to one of our experts, contact us through our Facebook page or at sunup@okstate.edu.